Alcove Raft Expedition was a profoundly misguided endeavor orchestrated by an incompetent researcher, yet paradoxically resulted in a heartwarming narrative of human connection. Domingo Terrazaga, an anthropologist with a fixation on human aggression, developed this controversial experiment in the 1970s. His inspiration came from previous monkey behavior studies suggesting that violence in primates stemmed primarily from reproductive competition. Domingo hypothesized that uncovering the roots of human violence could potentially reveal the formula for global harmony, an ambitious, if naive, objective. Before proceeding further, it's worth noting that throughout this account, nearly every decision or concept Domingo conceived will likely strike you as remarkably ill-conceived and irrational. This assessment would be entirely accurate, as Domingo demonstrated consistently poor scientific methodology throughout what could generously be termed an experiment. In the mid-1970s, Domingo designed the Alcove Raft Expedition. The concept involved placing 10 individuals on a substantial raft approximately 40 feet in length, which would drift across the Atlantic Ocean from the Iberian Peninsula to Central America over 101 days. While spaciousness wasn't a major concern and provisions were pre-rationed, the journey remained extraordinarily hazardous, which aligned with Domingo's objectives. He believed perilous circumstances would compel participants to revert to fundamental instinctual behaviors. Domingo selected 6 women and 4 men from diverse backgrounds and nationalities. This heterogeneous grouping served dual purposes, generating potential friction and creating a societal microcosm aboard the vessel. However, his selection criteria weren't arbitrary. Domingo deliberately chose physically attractive individuals between their early 20s and mid-30s, anticipating sexual interactions. He even included a particularly handsome clergyman to introduce an element of moral conflict. Acknowledging the shifting gender dynamics of the 1970s, Domingo assigned women to the most crucial operational roles. The captain, the maintenance diver, and the communications specialist were all female. While this aspect of his methodology seemed progressive, subsequent events would reveal Domingo's commitment to gender equality was superficial at best. With preparations completed and participants selected, the alcove departed on May 12, 1973. Domingo's experimental methodology essentially involved observing from a distance, documenting the participants' interactions as they presumably descended into chaotic aggression. This approach appears less scientific than voyeuristic, and the ethically questionable nature of the experiment becomes further apparent considering the participation agreement. The contract required subjects to surrender their souls, bodies, and minds to Domingo, an alarming stipulation by any standard. Domingo distributed weekly questionnaires with increasingly invasive inquiries, participants' feelings toward others, who they would eliminate from the group, their attractions, potential catalysts for violence, and their perceptions of others' violent tendencies. While undeniably intrusive, these surveys were confidentially shared only with Domingo, ostensibly for scientific purposes. Domingo's bias was unmistakable. He anticipated, perhaps desired, the expedition to deteriorate into aggressive chaos, allowing him to document human violence in its raw form. However, weeks into the journey, his expectations remained unfulfilled. Contrary to his hypothesis, the participants formed strong bonds, enjoying each other's company. Documentary footage captured them, smiling, laughing, and engaging in recreational activities together. Domingo had predicted that sexual relations would emerge and generate conflict leading to violence. Eventually, physical relationships did develop between several participants, but these encounters were primarily motivated by boredom rather than emotional attachment. Consequently, these interactions created virtually no discord within the group. As the experiment progressed in the opposite direction of Domingo's expectations, his questionnaires became increasingly provocative, inquiring about masturbation, frequency, sexual history, desired sexual partners, and homicidal impulses. Predictably, these inappropriate questions and Domingo's visibly dissatisfied demeanor alienated the group. When asked who they disliked most, many participants identified Domingo himself. One morning, several participants caught a small shark while fishing. This achievement naturally excited the group. Reading Domingo's journal entry about this incident suggests he interpreted this as the violent breakthrough he'd been awaiting. He wrote dramatically about them bashing the shark's head with an axe and tearing its flesh apart. However, video documentation reveals they were simply preparing the shark for consumption, a practical rather than violent act. To Domingo's continued disappointment, the positive group dynamic persisted. The participants continued developing friendships, occasionally engaging in intimate relationships, and increasingly resenting Domingo's presence. As time passed, the participants shared more personal experiences, creating a genuinely wholesome environment. One participant revealed that the expedition provided escape from an abusive relationship, expressing gratitude for the support received from fellow travelers. Another participant, the sole African-American woman aboard, experienced a profound moment, realizing her ancestors likely crossed the same ocean as enslaved people, a realization that deepened her appreciation for her current freedoms and opportunities. Meanwhile, Domingo observed from a distance, still hoping for violent conflict to emerge. When the raft's rudder malfunctioned, Domingo's hypocrisy became evident. Despite hiring Serena Zanotti as the expedition's diver specifically for her qualifications, Domingo refused to allow her to repair the rudder, claiming gender as a prohibitive factor, a baffling contradiction to his earlier rationale for hiring her. Though frustrated, Serena yielded temporarily. Domingo attempted the repair himself, using Serena's equipment which didn't fit him properly. Predictably, he failed, nearly drowned, and returned without fixing the rudder. That night, while Domingo slept, Serena independently dove beneath the vessel and successfully repaired the mechanism. Upon discovering this the following morning, Domingo erupted in anger. This incident marked a significant turning point. He began explicitly manipulating the experiment, calling a meeting to admonish participants for their cooperative behavior, claiming they weren't taking the experiment seriously. Most egregiously, Domingo began publicly sharing responses from the confidential questionnaires, announcing that certain participants harbored murderous intentions or sexual desires toward others, a transparent attempt to sow discord. In one particularly offensive instance, he referred to the sole black woman aboard as primitive and suggested she should naturally pair with the only black man, remarks that further cemented the group's collective disdain for Domingo. Around this time, several major newspapers reported on the experiment, informally dubbing it the intimate raft and focusing primarily on the sexual aspects of the journey. Upon seeing these headlines, Domingo's affiliated university immediately severed all connections with him and the experiment, considering it damaging to their reputation. This professional rejection further demoralized Domingo. As the raft drifted into Caribbean waters, they encountered an approaching tropical storm. Maria, the Swedish captain, prudently recommended seeking shelter on a nearby island. Domingo objected, arguing that civilization contact would compromise his study. When Maria prioritized safety over the increasingly futile experiment, Domingo arbitrarily relieved her of command and appointed himself captain. He ordered everyone inside the cabin with doors secured to weather the storm. Fortunately, the storm changed direction, sparing the raft from significant damage. Following this incident, the participants unanimously despised Domingo, even briefly, contemplating his elimination and discussing how to disguise it as an accident, though they ultimately decided against this course of action. A genuine crisis arose when a massive freighter headed directly toward the raft, threatening to crush it. Domingo, despite his self-appointed captaincy, panicked and ran about ineffectually. Meanwhile, Maria maintained composure, instructing everyone on proper distress signals, flares, visual indicators, and horn blasts. At the last moment, the freighter altered course, narrowly avoiding collision. Maria subsequently resumed her rightful position as captain. After this incident, Domingo effectively abandoned the experiment. He discontinued questionnaires, ceased documentation, and stopped conducting meetings, instead isolating himself. Claiming illness, he confined himself to the cabin, though participants, including the medic, later suspected he feigned sickness for attention. With Domingo's interference eliminated, the expedition atmosphere improved dramatically. Participants enjoyed unprecedented freedom and camaraderie without constant surveillance. They later reported that this period transformed their casual friendships into genuine, meaningful connections. Eventually, the raft reached its destination with all participants having formed deep bonds. Despite Domingo's fixation on provoking violence, none materialized. Instead, the group developed a supportive community that defied his expectations. This narrative resonates because it demonstrates humanity's capacity for cooperation, triumphing over artificial attempts to instigate conflict. It seems unlikely that Domingo's motivations were genuinely scientific. Rather, he appeared to desire witnessing a disturbing survival of the fittest scenario. His methodology lacked scientific rigor, and despite his blatant manipulation and antagonism, he never achieved the violence he sought. Instead, ironically, he facilitated lifelong friendships among people who might never have otherwise met.